Welcome, everybody. My name is Marty Mascari. I am with the North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging and the North Central Texas Aging and Disability Resource Center, or ADRC, both of which are under the North Central Texas Council of Governments in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. We're once again blessed to have our partners at James L. West Center, Holly Glover and Jamie Cobb-Tinsley, here to talk about caring for someone in the middle stages of dementia. Before we get started, Beth, we're going to cover the CEUs. Jamie?
Yeah, we are happy to provide free CEU credits, 1.5 hours for nursing, social work, licensed professional counselors, and a certificate of attendance. You'll receive a follow-up email with a SurveyMonkey link to the evaluation. We ask that everybody complete the evaluation, but if you are requesting CE credits, you are required to complete the evaluation. And if you will please give us 3 to 4 weeks to process all those certificates, and then we'll send them to you in your email address. And the survey is open until the end of the day on May 18th.
Great.
Thank you.
In addition to the SurveyMonkey, there'll be a Google survey that it should pop up or give you the option to open it up as you log out of Zoom today. And if it doesn't, you also receive that in the follow-up email. We ask that you will complete that. That helps us in reporting back on the goals and objectives we set forth when we applied for the funding to put these together. Please note that you need to complete the entire webinar in order to qualify for CEUs, and we have to have that documentation, and we get that from Zoom. But a couple of things. First of all, please note that if you're logged in under somebody else's invitation, your name is not going to show up most likely, and then we won't have the documentation to provide you with the CEUs. The other thing is we go through the CEU requirements twice during the webinar, once at the beginning and once at the end. Please don't email me right after the webinar or 2 hours later and say, I was on the webinar, what do I do to get my CEUs? Because as being professionals and you wanting CEUs for attending, we figure you should be on at least one of the 2 times to get those guidelines as we go. I'm going to turn it over to Holly and to talk to us about caring for someone in middle stages of dementia.
Thank you, Marty. Jamie, you have anything to add before I get started?
We'll just be watching the chat. If you have any questions or comments, we'll be on the lookout, and there should be time afterwards for questions as well. That's it.
Great. Thank you. So last month we did caring for someone in the early stages of dementia. And if you missed that, we are going to do just a short review of that because that leads right into middle stages. Next month, we will be doing caring for someone in the later stages of dementia. But because this is a 3-part series, we'll do a little bit of a review. There's some information about the West Center. Or if you are somebody who's on here with us regularly, you've heard us talk about the West Center here in Fort Worth. We're long-term care, but we are specific to dementia care. That's all we do. We're 100 beds. We have a day program, and we also do. We will be doing short-term rehab very shortly. If you want more information, you can contact us. So again, we're just going to do about 4 slides here where we're going to go a review over what we talked about last month, just in case you weren't here, and then also to just remind us of a few things. So we started out with that what is dementia? Because many times people will use the word dementia and memory loss just interchangeably. And there's so much more to dementia than memory loss. In fact, when we do our Dementia 101 class, we talk about there's a couple of different types of dementia that actually present with no memory loss. The memory loss comes later. So we can't use dementia and memory loss interchangeably. But what we need to keep in mind about dementia is that it's progressive. All of the dementias, and there's over 130 different types of dementia. There's no cure for any of them, and they're all terminal. The brain is actually dying. In all of the dementias, they're going from about a 3-pound brain down to a 1-pound brain, and we're going to look at a picture of that in just a minute. The neurons and the wiring in the brain are starting to malfunction. and they eventually completely stop working and they die. And that's why we see these things like personality changes, the inability to take care of themselves, somebody who has been able to toilet themselves for 70 years and now they can't, or someone who's been walking, talking, feeding themselves. All of those activities of daily living are suddenly, they need reminders to do them in the beginning. If you were here last month, you remember that early stages we called normalization, where they're just needing reminders and cues. They can still do the majority of things for themselves. That sensory input and motor output really changes. We're going to talk a lot about that in the middle stages. Movement and coordination is part of this as well, losing those fine motor skills first, and eventually the gross motor skills. Let's take a look at that brain that I was talking about, and we use this picture quite often. It says Alzheimer's disease, but the progression of each of the dementias is very similar to this. That brain on the left is a normal 3-pound brain. That brain on the right is an end stage 1-pound brain, and look at the difference. When I'm teaching students, I always start with this picture and just tell them, tell me what you see. What are the differences that you see here? The atrophy, that shrinkage, and then those are holes, literally holes in the brain. How in the world could we expect the person on the right to act like the person on the left? They can't. They don't have the ability to. They would if they could. And again, to review the early stages, we're going to do that for these 2 slides, and then we'll jump right into the middle stages. So early in the disease, I was visiting with somebody earlier today, and she was talking about just the small little things, the changes that her husband did. They would record TV shows to watch and turn it on, and he'd say, I've already seen this. Just small things. This is before he had a diagnosis, where it was just getting her to go, what's going on? There's something not quite right. And then will argue with me about it. Small things. Starting to misuse words or be very vague. The thing and the stuff. Starting to lose nouns and the proper names of things. Really getting disorganized. Sequencing. Anything that has a lot of steps. And this is early in the disease. We'll start seeing them having issues with things with lots of steps. Misusing pronouns is really common early in the disease. We've got a female medical director, and it's not uncommon at all for her to walk away from a resident and someone say, what did he want? So that's pretty common for them to misuse pronouns early in the disease. Saying things like, I've mentioned losing the proper name. So saying something like, I need that thing that writes. I need some stuff to drink. But they're not naming what stuff. Is it tea? Is it Crystal Light? Is it Dr. Pepper? They're losing the proper name. And again, this is early. If English is their second language, they're going to start reverting back to their original language more and more because they are doing what we discussed last month. We mentioned this, that theory of retrogenesis, where they're just slowly kind of going back to who they originally were. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. They start using more gestures early in the disease, and we do too as caregivers. We learn to start using fewer words and more motions so that they will mirror our actions. Early in the disease, they may start to get lost. Sometimes that's the first thing that people see is they get lost in a place that they've gone many times. And then personality changes. Depression is very common early in the disease. And a few more changes early in the disease. Keep in mind also, this is important to remember, if you've seen one person with dementia, you've seen one person with dementia. Everybody's is similar but different. Similar but different. So the way that a 65-year-old man with Alzheimer's progresses and the way that an 82-year-old woman with vascular dementia progresses may not look the same at all. They're both dementias, but you've got to take into account their age, their comorbidities, lots of other things. Early in the disease, we also want to make sure that we're including them in conversations and decision-making, and that we're having some of those hard talks about the future. What's the future going to look like? What do they want? Because the last thing we want is for a family to get to end of life and they don't know what their loved one's wishes were. And they're having to make decisions without them because they didn't want to have the hard talk. We also start learning early in the disease to be an active listener, active listening. And with these darn phones, you can't see it, there it is. With these phones, sometimes we are looking right at this phone while somebody's talking to us. And that's not active listening. Active listening is when you're giving someone 100% of your attention. We really start thinking about what feelings and emotions are being expressed. And Jamie and I, as we teach, we have stopped using the word challenging behaviors, and we now use challenging expressions. There are some challenging expressions that go along with memory care. But as you'll hear us say over and over, and I've even got this on a slide coming up, a person with dementia is not giving you a hard time. That person with dementia is having a hard time. And finally, with the early stages, again, we call it normalization, and we start really learning how to nurture our relationship because we want to keep that connection with our loved one, with our patients, clients, residents, all the way through end of life. And family caregivers, it's important that your identity never become caregiver, that you lose wife, husband, brother, sister, daughter, son, friend. Now, you heard me mention earlier that theory of retrogenesis, and here it is. So I thought this would be a great time for us to look at it and talk about it a little bit more. I know it's hard to see, but you will get copies of this and you'll be able to make a copy and really see it. So let's think about their abilities are parallel to that developmental age. So for example, let's think about this. If you tell a 5-year-old to go get dressed, they are able to go get dressed, but think about how they might come back out of the room. Princess dress and cowboy boots and a rain jacket, and they're ready to go. They could put them on, but they may not have dressed appropriately. So when we tell our loved one to go and get dressed, and they come out and they've got on 4 shirts, or their underwear's on the outside of their pants, or they've got on 2 mismatched shoes, or they've got on their Santa sweatshirt and it's July, they're still able to dress themselves. They just need some guidance. That's where this chart is so handy. So if you look there where it says mild, this for the most part is when their developmental age is 8 up to adolescent. And this is the earliest stages of the disease. But what we're going to talk about today is the middle stage. And notice this gap between 2 years old and 7 years old. Think of the huge difference in what a 2-year-old is able to do and a 7-year-old is able to do. That's big. So what we can do is we use this chart over here and we look at these skill levels and these clinical characteristics, and it gives us an idea of what they are still able to do, because we don't want to focus on they can't. We want to focus on what still remains. What still remains. And that's what we're really going to focus on today. Now, another thing that this chart really helps us with is to help us have some empathy and really understand. Because if you look at moderate and you look at, let's just say the stage 6 on this, That's going to be somebody who's about 6 years old. And when somebody who is 6 years old feels like they're being mistreated, what might they do? They might have a verbal outburst. They might have a physical outburst. They might stomp their foot and turn and run away, or fall on the floor and have a tantrum. When you see the 2 to 5 years old, from the 6 up to the 6E up to a 6A, having a temper tantrum is how they might respond. But then we look at our adult husband, wife, mother, father, friend, brother, sister, and they're having a tantrum, and we call it a challenging behavior. They're doing the best they can with what remains. Just like that 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old is doing the best they can with what's developed. Theirs hasn't developed yet. So that's another way to use this chart that family members, I find over and over. If you're a professional and you run support groups, please make copies of this and give it out. This is a great topic for a support group. My families ask for them all the time. So let's jump right into the middle stages. Jamie is on, so if you have questions while we're going, you can put them in the chat and she'll try to answer them. If not, you can hold them till the end, and we will sure try to stop and make sure we have time at the end to get to them. All right, so we said the early stage is called normalization. The middle stage is going to be called the supportive stage. We're accepting and we're adapting to a new reality. Now they're going to start needing support with just about everything, but they can still do a lot. So let's look at some of the changes that are expected in the middle stages. Now, family members that are on today, I don't want you to look at this and go, oh, well, my loved one's not doing, so they must still be. There's many people land on that cusp where they're a little bit in the early and they're a little bit in the middle stage. So it's kind of a cusp, especially earlier in the day. They may be in the earlier stages, and later in the day, they're in the middle stages. They're slowly turning the corner of dementia. So let's look at what these changes might be. Speech changes a lot. The middle stage of dementia is the longest stage of the disease, and we will really see their ability to communicate change. And we're going to look at that a lot closer in just a minute. Their speech may even start to not even make any sense, where their sentence structure, it's still words, but you cannot make a bit of sense out of it. Here's an example. I just had this happen a little bit ago. I was over in our day program, and a woman had been eating something that had churros. She had cinnamon and sugar all over her fingers, and she came up and was telling me, and the stuff, and it's in, and I need to get these, and it's on my, and I, in it, and I could figure out what she was saying, and what I said back to her was, it looks like you got sugar on your fingers. Oh, I bet that's sweet. Let's get this off of here. I said, it also looks like sand. And I was giving her her words by having a conversation. I never said to her, do you mean sugar? Because that's pointing out that she can't find the word. And I didn't say directly to her, what's on your hands? Because she was showing me what was on her hands. She was getting very close to me, much closer than would normally be, because her social skills are changing, but she still trusted me. So she got very into my space, was putting her hands right up near my face to show me that this was troubling her. That could have turned into a challenging expression if I'd have told her to go back in there or to wipe her own hands, or to, and I just grabbed some and I was getting it off, and I said, oh, now I got it on me. Look at that. We got this all over us, don't we? Let's do that. She was able to mirror all of my actions. It was no big deal at all. It took us a little bit longer, but she could mirror me, but she couldn't find the words. She can still feed herself. She can still do a lot of things for herself, but her communication skills are changing. During this middle stage, they're very likely going to stop calling people by name. They may still know the relationship. And they may be able to run through a list of names of people in the family till they get to the right name, or the names just may go. In the middle stage, we hear lots of thing and stuff. Those are very generic words. The thing and the thing, you know, the stuff and the thing and the thing, the stuff and the thing. This is where we come in and say, show me the thing. What does the thing do? They can usually still answer that. Big lapses of memory, especially short-term memory and immediate recalls, pretty much gone in the middle stages, immediate recall. And then my favorite word here, confabulation. Confabulation, where they make up a story, but to them it's very, very true. It is not a lie. There is a difference in a lie and confabulation. We tell lies when we think we're going to be in trouble. We tell lies when we're trying to hide something. It's very intentional. But for a person with dementia to confabulate, they typically are still trying to be part of a conversation. So if we're all sitting around talking about where we went to college, and I say, I went to Sam Houston State University, they may say, I went there too. They're not telling a lie, they're confabulating. They're still being able to have a conversation, but they're making it up. Run with it. Use it as an opportunity to connect. Tell me what you did in college. They may have never even gone to college, but I'm going to sit here and have a conversation with them. And I'm connecting, and that's a whole lot better than just sitting and staring at the TV. They may get more suspicious or paranoid during this time and start thinking people are taking their money or even hiding things from them, when lots of times it's them that are putting things away to be safe, and then they don't remember where they put it. They're not hiding the mail. They're putting it away somewhere so that it's safe. Loss of impulse control. And we could also call that their filter. Their filter's right in here, and that part of the brain is gone or it's damaged. And so they'll do and say things they never, ever would have said or done because that's what's left. They're not near as in control of their emotions, and lots of judgment errors. Some other things that we can expect in the middle stages. You may find them singing more. We talked last month about the fact that the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain deteriorate at different rates. And they tend, most everybody with dementia tends to lose that left side earlier, that day-to-day language earlier, the hippocampus. But that right side tends to remain longer. And that's the rhythmic side of the brain, and that's where music is stored. And you may find someone starting to do lots of sing-songy, and they'll be able to sing probably longer than they'll be able to talk. Use music. Use lots of music. Their music. Not your music, their music. Sequencing, they start having issues with sequencing early in the disease. It just becomes harder in the middle stages. Now, I really want to talk about this disorientation to time, past, present, and future. They may completely be making sense and telling the truth and telling you a story about something that happened 40 years ago, but they're saying it happened yesterday, because it did. It did to them. But yesterday might not mean anything, if this makes sense. Time is also stored up here, and time is one of the things that's usually affected early. So in this middle stage, things like 3 o'clock, that doesn't mean anything. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, get back in bed. That does not mean anything, but you know what does? Daytime and nighttime. Because what'd you learn first? When we were little, it's nighttime, it's time for bed. Not it's 8 o'clock, it's time for bed. We learn daytime and nighttime first. So when someone's up at 3 o'clock and they think it's time to go to work, if we show them it's dark out the window and we say it's nighttime, it's time to sleep, many times that'll work. I've had support group members tell me that over and over. We stop using the number time, 3 o'clock, and we say nighttime and daytime. So past, present, future can all kind of become a blur. Really having difficulty with stimulation and being overstimulated. And again, we're going to talk more about their senses as we go on today. They still may be very curious about their environment, but they don't have very much self-awareness. So we've got to really be careful in this middle stage because people can have accidents and get hurt. And with that being said, one of our bullet points there says there may be more surprises that happen. Things, again, that you never, ever would have thought in these middle stages is when we walk in and they have on all 12 briefs. Adults don't wear diapers, they wear briefs. And so they're putting on these pull-ups, and there's 12 in the package, so they put on all 12 of them. Because they keep putting them on until there's not anymore. Think about what you might do if you walked in and that happened. Think about it just a second. We're never going to go in and say, what in the world are you thinking you got on 12 briefs? Because that might get you one of these. But what if I went in and said something like, oh my goodness, it looks like you've got a few extras of those. Could I have a couple of them? I was needing could I get a few of those? I had this happen with somebody. And I set her down and we started pulling those off, and she could breathe again since she had on 12 of them. And I made it about me. It wasn't about her. She could still dress herself. We learned a lesson that day. You can't leave an entire package of briefs in the room with her. Just leave one or two, because she's going to put them all on. We go to their world. They can't come to ours. This also, during this stage, you may start hearing the word no an awful lot. No is one of the first words we learn, and no stays with most people until the end of life. But they may use the word no to every question. Are you hungry? No. Do you want to go outside? No. Are you cold? No. You've got to look at their body language, their tone, and their gestures. So if someone has a furrowed brow and they're holding their stomach, and we say, does your stomach hurt? No. They're saying yes. What that no means, no, my stomach hurts, stay away from me. So we've got to be really careful about asking questions like that. We might do something more like, come on, let's go outside. It is beautiful. I'm going to sit outside. Come on. We're not even saying, do you want to? Because we're probably going to get no. You might also find them agreeing or disagreeing to things that they really don't know that they're disagreeing to. Let's look at what's going on with the caregiver during this middle stage. Hopefully, by this middle stage, the caregiver has reached out to start filling up their toolbox and developing some skills, taking classes like this, getting into a support group. This is a time also we've got to make sure that the home is safe if our loved one's still at home. Many people during the middle stage, this is when they're placed into a facility or a care center, possibly an assisted living. We continue to work on not taking it personally. We talked about that in the early stage, that they may say and do things directed at us. That's the disease and not them. They may do things when we're out in public that can be embarrassing. And you may still be trying to work, and this is a very expensive disease. Every day is going to be different. And when somebody asks you something like, how's your mom doing? How's your husband doing? One of the things that I have found that is appropriate to say is, we have good days and bad days. Some days are better than others. Support. Remember, this stage is the supportive stage. We want to allow them to continue to do as much for themselves as they can with our support. We may not be able to say, go in the bathroom and get ready. It's almost time to leave. We may have to go in the bathroom with them, hand them the toothbrush with the toothpaste on it, and then they're good to go. They're good. Muscle memory kicks in and away they go. You got to watch the time though, because they may stand there for 10 minutes and brush their teeth. And then we put that away and we may be able to hand them the razor and the shaving cream and they're still able to shave. And then we put that away and then we hand them the deodorant, because if there's too much out here, we're going to end up with toothpaste all over our face because of the steps. So it takes more effort on our part. Also, during this time, we encourage families to carry cards like the size of a business card that has a little note on it, so that you can still go out to restaurants. But it says something like, please excuse my companion, they have dementia. Something along those lines. We have some here. The Alzheimer's Association has them. You can make your own. I know somebody who was in our day program and she made up a card for her daddy that says, my dad has Alzheimer's, please. And she just put a little note on it. And then at the restaurant, she'd set it on the edge of the table so the server could see it in case he said or did something that might not be appropriate for a restaurant. Let's look at communication. We're going to start talking about communication. And in the next slide, we're actually going to look at a video of that moderate stage and what it can look like in one person. Because again, you've seen dementia in one person, you've seen dementia in one person. So what middle stage looks like for one person and what it looks like for another may be different. Please keep in mind also, with that middle stage of the disease, people many times can still read words, but they can't comprehend what they read. So be careful if in the earlier stages you were using written notes and they could read it and comprehend it. There's going to come a time that they can still read it out loud to you, but they don't know what they've read. I used to do assessments and I would write on a piece of paper, close your eyes, and hand it over to the person. They'd read it out loud and look at me. Because what does that mean? Close your eyes. But they could read the words, but they couldn't do what I asked them to do. So keep that in mind. We want to make sure that we start to reduce distractions. Their world is changing. It's becoming more narrow at this point. We have to slow down, keep eye contact. We're not going to talk to them from the side or ever from behind, speaking directly to them, asking questions one at a time, giving commands one at a time. A person with dementia can only have one thought at a time. So we've got to do step by step. And by the middle stages, they might be able to do a 2-step. By the end of the middle stage, they're going to be at a 1-step. Make sure you repeat back to them so that you're clear. And you're also validating. So if I am beating my fist and I'm talking about how loud those people upstairs are, but there's not an upstairs. Think about my choices here. I can either say something like, there's not an upstairs. What you're hearing is the air conditioner. That was just a squirrel on the roof, whatever. That's being reasonable and rational. They can't do that. Those people upstairs making so much, they are making racket, aren't they? Look what I'm doing. I'm validating their feeling. This is a therapeutic story. It isn't a lie. It's a therapeutic story. Alzheimer's Association calls them fiblets. They are making noise. I'm going to go tell them to hush. Now, come on, let's get in here and get us some ice cream. I'm validating the feeling. I'm going to fix it, and then I'm going to distract. Validate, fix, distract. We learned how to do it early in the disease. We're going to become masters of it in the middle stage. Validate the feeling, fix what the issue is, and distract away. We'll talk more about them. We don't want to start pulling away. This is when we're going to nurture this relationship. Continue with our connections. Let's watch our first short video. And this is going to be an example of what mid-stage for this particular woman looks like. This is her and her son, and they're going to give us a glimpse into her day. And she would be considered in the later stages of the middle stage. You'll see what she can still do for herself and what she can't. That's what I want you to see.
My name is Pedro. I'm 43 years old and I'm a delivery driver. Currently, I'm looking after my mum. She's got Alzheimer's. She's 75 now. She's had it for 8 years. I've always lived with my mum, so I'm her main carer. She was like, the homemaker. She spoiled me in respects to doing everything for me. So it's definitely payback now, role reversal, that's for sure. 1, 2, 3, that's it, up we go. I work 10.25 hours a day now. While I'm at work, she has a carer come in 3 times a day. Nowadays, she basically pretty much sleeps. She pretty much stays in bed. She doesn't wander around the house so much like she used to. Lift it up. Lift it up. Okay, use the other one. Careful, careful. Come on, step up. Lift your foot up. The 3 words that I'd use to describe being a carer are frustrating, challenging, and fulfilling. A lot of the time it's frustrating when she knows she's going into the bath. She'll fight me. I've often got, you can see the little marks there where she's trying to pinch me. But you've got to take on every role to the point of where you're feeding her and, wiping her bum. That leads on to the second thing, which is challenging. Finding the time to deal with her not being necessarily able to go out when you might want. And then the last one, it's fulfilling because she's my mum. I love her, and it's like you're just returning the favour, so to speak. Come on, let's take this one off. Really, there's mainly my sister, who's the person who alleviated me. My girlfriend, she lives here. You've got that, is it mother-in-law, daughter-in-law thing? It's certainly something that I think anybody within a relationship could do without. It's not just that you've got a parent-in-law there, you've got somebody who actually basically needs looking after. Take your boots off, mate. Take your boots off. Ready? It's got me down at times, having to deal with it one way or another, whether it's the physical side of things, the mental side of things, the way she and the condition treat me. But you still have these little moments that are just like fantastic, like just the little cheeky things that she might say or do, or like just everything. On the graph, it's generally down, but within that, you have peaks and troughs. Better. Yeah. Right then. Have a little sleep. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. You sometimes get glimpses of her, but it hits home when, I'm there and I'm lying next and I'm talking to her and saying something and she just, there's no response. When she passes, I'm trying to think what am I going to do? Do I have to fill up the time? I don't know. It's just obviously going to be an empty space, but the empty space is not just responsibility. It's my mum. So it's almost as though I guess I'll be welcoming the responsibility back, and then she'll be here, isn't it?
So there's a couple of things I want to point out from what he said. I hope you noticed what she was still able to do. That staircase scares me. The stairs have got to go. He had her coming up those stairs every day, but she was able to come up the stairs with a lot of assistance. She's still walking. She was still understanding a lot of what he was saying to her, and she could assist him with getting dressed and undressed. And you may have noticed what he was saying. Let's take your boots off. And he had his tone up. He was being very pleasant, but he was telling her before they did it, even before he took off her sweater. Let's take this sweater off. And then he started taking the sweater off instead of just coming up and touching her and pulling things off, because that might get you one of these because of a startle reflex. So we always want to say what we're doing. You heard him use 3 words: frustrating, challenging, and fulfilling. He mentioned that in the bath, how she will pinch him, and he had bruises on his arms that he showed. Frustrating. Challenging. He doesn't have any free time. He said he's 43 years old. He works 10 hours a day. He has caregivers. And then when he comes home, he's doing it. But then he said it's fulfilling. It's my mom. I love her and I'm returning the favor. I run our support groups here. And those 3 words I hear over and over. And at the end of this disease, and when people look back, the majority of them say, I wouldn't have missed this. It wasn't that I had to do it. I got to do it. I was able to do it. I was blessed to do it. But boy, it was hard. It was a whipping. And he's saying the same thing. You may have also heard him say, and I wrote this down because I thought it was very wise. He said, the way that she and the condition treat me. He's realizing, he's recognizing the disease, and he's blaming the disease. The condition treats me this way. The disease treats me this way. This is something that I encourage people in support group. Write a letter to Alzheimer's and tell Alzheimer's what you think about it and what it's done to you and your life and your loved one. Write a letter to frontotemporal dementia. Write a letter to Lewy body dementia. That's very healthy of him to be able to say how this condition treats me. And then he also mentioned getting glimpses of her, glimpses of his mother, and there she is. And we'll continue to get that throughout the course of the disease, where we get those glimpses where they make the connection, and there they are in the midst of all of this. And that's why we've got on here, the relationship is the most important aspect in communicating with your loved one. One of the reasons she was doing so well with him was the way he was talking to her, the way he was treating her. We start to use a lot of those, you heard me say earlier, those therapeutic stories or therapeutic fibs, redirection, taking the blame ourselves. So when I call my loved one that has dementia and I tell them I'm on my way to pick them up for the doctor's appointment, and I get there and they say, what are you doing here? I didn't have a doctor's appointment. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you. That's my fault. We take the blame. What good is it going to do for me to say, I just called you 5 minutes ago, look right here on my phone. That's reasoning and rational behavior. They can't do it. Let's look at this about communication, because we've already mentioned how the communication is going to change. And this is for all of us. 55% of communication is body language. 38% of communication is our tone. And only 7% is the words. So over 90% of communication is nonverbal. So as the disease progresses, I said this earlier, we are going to find ourselves using more cues, gestures, our body language, and our tone becomes more and more important. About 80% of the time, when our loved one, our residents, clients, patients, has a challenging behavior, a challenging expression, either we or the environment caused it. We didn't mean to. We would have never done anything on purpose to make that happen, but it was our approach. It was our tone. It was them reading my furrowed brow and looking aggravated and agitated. And they picked up on that, so they gave it right back to me. This is a skill set. It's a skill set none of us wanted, but we learn it. Let's talk more about those gestures, visual cues. You've heard me say the word mirroring, that they will mirror. At mealtime, I used to have someone, her husband was still at home, and she would put his plate in front of him and he would look at it. So she would sit directly across from him. He could see her. She was right across from him, square-shouldered. And when whatever she would pick up, he would pick up, and he would still do exactly what she did. She even talked about they had a salad, and she was putting things on the salad, and he would put things on the salad. But if she would have just told him to sit down and get your salad ready, he'd have had, that didn't mean anything, but he could mirror her. Now, keep in mind, they will mirror those good actions, but they'll also mirror challenging actions too. So if we're in a facility and we have one person who might decide that door's coming down, I'm getting out of here, and one's over there on the door, here in a minute, you may have 5 people over at the door. The person we want to get away from the door is the one who started, and the others will probably follow. Using gestures like patting the chair, holding up the fork, putting up the jacket, or taking off our own jacket. Those are mirroring. This is good with ADLs, those activities of daily living too. We may just have to make the gesture of brushing our teeth or shaving, and then they can still do it for themselves. We talk about compassionate communication a lot in validation therapy. Here's compassionate communication right here. We're not going to reason. They can't. We're not going to argue. We're never going to win this. Why are we trying to argue with somebody with dementia? We can't confront them or remind them that they forgot. I already told you. Remember I said, and we sure don't want to use the word remember, because that means you're questioning their memory. And then being to the point, we cannot take it personally. When our loved one was healthy, we could reason with them. We could argue with them. We could confront. They're not healthy anymore. The brain is dying. But early in the disease and even into the middle stages, you can't see it. You may not be able to look at them and say, oh, that person had. So we expect them to still be reasonable and rational, and they aren't. Let's talk about validation therapy. It's one of my favorite things to teach people about is validation therapy. If you get the chance to really study it or do one of our whole sessions on validation therapy and compassionate communication, I encourage you to. It was developed in the 1960s, and it was developed by a social worker whose name is Naomi Field. She had worked with the elderly for many, many years. She is still working with the elderly. She is well into her 90s, and she has a website. And what she found was back in the 60s, when we were still using orientation or reality therapy, trying to bring people into our reality, that wasn't working out well at all. So she started using what she called validation therapy. And it's where we validate their world, like the example I gave you earlier of the people upstairs, even when there wasn't an upstairs. With dementia, a person's most trusted loved one, their spouse, their child, may turn into a stranger when they look at us. They may not see that we are their spouse or their child or their brother or their sister. They may see us as somebody else, especially as they do that theory of retrogenesis, and they go back to a time in their lives. We were talking earlier about somebody being 6, 7, 8 years old. Well, I didn't have a husband or a wife when I was 6, 7, 8. I had a mama and a daddy, and they were my safe people, hopefully. So I might look in the face of my husband or wife and call them mama or daddy. Validation therapy. We can't keep saying to them, no, I'm your husband. No, I'm your wife. I don't have a wife. I don't have a husband. We're validating their feelings. So it's, like I said, it's very common for someone to look in the face of their adult daughter and call them mother. Let me give you an example of somebody that I watched over the course of 3 years. A woman moved in, her mother, and the very first Christmas, she brought all these cards up, and they did Christmas cards together. And she told me that was their tradition. They always did their Christmas cards together. They were doing it outside my office. I sat and watched them. She could still sign her name, and they talked about each of these people on their Christmas card list. The second year, her mom couldn't write anymore. So we talked about how could you still include her with these Christmas cards. So she went and got some stamps and some stickers, and the daughter filled out the cards. And the mom put stamps and stickers on them. 3rd year, which ended up being her last year. It was her last Christmas. So here we are, further into the disease. Mom could no longer, she didn't have the fine motor skills to be able to do much of anything with the stamps, stickers, or anything with the cards. And the daughter seriously talked about not even doing it anymore. But we talked. I said, how many years have y'all been doing Christmas cards together? Bring those cards up here. Let's put on Christmas music, have your mom sit there beside you, and you tell her the story of each of these people as you're making the cards out. Tell her her story. By this point in the disease, I might also add, her mother was calling her mama. She would look right at her daughter and call her mama. And I worked with her through that, being able to accept that, and to be able to view it and see it as what a gift. She trusts me so much. I'm her safe person. She doesn't recognize me as her daughter anymore, but she recognizes me as her mom. And they were able to have that connection, talked about connection, all the way to the end of her life, because she was validating her and where she was in the disease. We've talked about time. We've talked about them confusing past, present. The mind plays tricks on them. Their emotions are very, very different. Another story, I had a wife who just insisted that her husband was going to know it was her. She said, we have been married almost 70 years. He has to know who I am. And I was there with her when she was saying, who am I? Who am I? Which we never want to do that. That's testing their memory. And he finally looked at her and said, you're the nurse. And she said, I'm your wife. And he said, my wife doesn't have white hair. My wife has red hair. Think about where he was on that theory of retrogenesis. He was a young man married to a young woman. And this woman with white hair who was taking care of him, think about how this makes sense in his mind, was the nurse. That's the mind of dementia. Another thing, if somebody comes up and they're looking for a loved one who's passed away, like if they're calling us mama and we say, your mom died. Oh, what? My mom died. That may be the first time they've heard it, because it's the first time they've heard it. So we aren't going to necessarily tell somebody over and over and over that their loved one has died. That's where we use those therapeutic stories. If they're looking for mom, tell me about your mama. If they're looking for their husband or they're looking for, tell me about them. What's going on with them? Where'd you meet them? It's their husband. Where'd you meet your husband? Tell me a story. And we sit down with them and we go get some ice cream or we get some cookies and we actually let them talk. Let them share those stories. Here's some do's and don'ts of validation therapy using their words and gestures. We talked about that, just kind of going with the flow, agreeing with them, taking the blame. We don't have to get caught up on whether something makes sense or not. I used to have a man come in my office every day and accuse me of stealing all of his money, getting into his bank account. And he would come in with a furrowed brow and you're the one that took all my money. And I would meet him just like he came in and say, well, sit down right there. We're calling the bank. I'm going to get this fixed. Validation therapy. I met him where he was. I validated his feelings. I can't believe they made that mistake. Let me get on the phone. And I'd pick up my office phone and call my cell phone and wear that bank out. Boy, I'm glad we got that fixed. Now, come on, let's get down here to some breakfast. And about 9 times out of 10, that worked. Every once in a while, he'd want to talk to the bank. I'd just call the front desk and tell them, is this the bank? I've got Mr. So, and they'd go right along with us because they knew what we were doing. I validated his feelings. I fixed the problem and I distracted away. Validate, fix it, and distract away. Don't make it into a big deal that could cause one of those challenging expressions. Here's some examples of things that we can say or things that we can use. You seem irritated because this thing isn't here. Tell me more about it. Is it this or is it that? Can you show me? I was thinking that too. This is when the lady came up to me earlier today with all that stuff on her fingers. You know, I had stuff on my fingers too. No, I did not. I did after I got finished cleaning her up, but she was furrowed brow. Wasn't just in the stuff. I said, oh, I've got some of that too. Here, let's get this off of us. Validated her feeling, fixed it, distracted her away. We went out and got busy doing something else. Some phrases that we might use, and I've mentioned these, tell me more, as long as they can, or we might say, show me. If they're getting upset, I am so sorry that that happened. I'm sorry that I made you angry. Just like, I'm sorry I forgot to tell you about the doctor's appointment. I'm sorry, I know this is hard when they're having a hard time with something. I was trying to help. We're putting it on me, not them. You can get mad with them. You can get upset with them. It's okay for them to have these emotions. We want to wrap them in bubble wrap and keep them happy all the time, but that's not reality. They're going to have emotions. Meet them where they are. This is important. Look at this very first bullet point. They are saying normal things and doing normal things for someone with dementia. Because families will forever look at their loved one and go, I can't believe they're doing that. Well, I can't believe they're doing it either if they didn't have dementia. But for somebody in the middle stage of dementia, that is normal. That's why we've got to do programs like this, so we understand, what does the middle stage of dementia look like? You can't control the disease. You can control your reaction, or let's change that word to response to the disease. We don't even want to react. We want to respond. Some of you have heard me say the difference in a reaction and a response, a single breath. I walk in, my mom's got all 12 of her briefs on, but I take that breath. I push some oxygenated blood up to my brain, and I'm better able to say, oh my goodness, I was looking for a few of those. Could you share them with me? Rather than, what in the world are you doing putting on 12? Because I took that breath. Third bullet point, a symptom of dementia is memory loss. They don't remember that they don't remember that they don't remember. Make sure you hear that. They can't remember that they can't remember that they can't remember. That's why they ask questions over and over again. And we keep giving the reassurances, and we keep giving that answer with the same words, with the same tone. Because if you change the words or you change the tone, you're going to hear something different. You just start it all over. Their reality is very different from ours. We go to theirs, and then their reality is always changing. So I told you at the very beginning of this that we were going to talk about the senses. We know that all 5 senses really change throughout the course of the disease, and we're going to see a lot of change in this middle stage. So let's talk about the 4 A's and the 5 senses. One of the things as we're talking about these that I want you to keep in mind, we have to keep in mind, dementia is brain failure. The brain is failing. As you're working with your loved one and they're changing all the time, this is going to help us emotionally, and we're going to better be able to handle this day to day. We keep in mind the brain is failing. Let's look at the first one. The first A we're going to talk about is amnesia. Now, you may think of amnesia and think of the movies where somebody has the temporary amnesia. But here's what amnesia. It can be short-term, it can be long-term, but think about all of the things they lose as they lose their memories. Because look at some of this on here. You may not have thought of it. Procedural memories. That's that sequencing. What order do I do this? They lose that. That's part of the memory that they're losing. That working memory, that short-term memory, those long-term memories, the memories of my life, now those stay for a lot of people for a very long time. The episodic memories, my experiences, and those emotional memories also stay for a very long time because of that amygdala that stays intact in their brain that stores feelings and emotions. That's why if they've ever had trauma in their past and they're doing that theory of retrogenesis and then they're going back in time, that trauma can resurface. It's called trauma-informed care. It's a whole nother program that we've got. Aphasia goes right along with dementia. And the definition for it would be the inability to express or understand language. Not just express, but also understand. So it might be that they're just not understanding. We're putting too many words in that sentence. We're used to using lots of adjectives and lots of descriptive words, adverbs and adjectives. We've got to stop using those. We're going to bring it down. Sit here. Not go sit over there in the rocking chair. Yeah, that one with the red cushion on it. Yeah, that one. Too many words. Sit here as we're patting the chair and starting to squat down ourselves. So communication is impaired. That's where we've got to bring it down and start speaking in these very short, maybe even incomplete sentences. Agnosia. This one's interesting. This is where we don't recognize objects. We don't recognize people. We don't recognize sounds or shapes or smells. So think about this. They hear the phone ringing, but they don't know where that sound's coming from. And you can see in the picture there, they're holding a banana, but I'm thinking I've got some grapes. Or what is this I'm holding? And it's an apple, but I'm thinking here's a great example. I had somebody one time, they had a cornucopia that was made out of candles. So it was all this fruit, nuts and things, and they were all candles. Well, one of the candles was an apple candle. It looked like an apple. It smelled like an apple. It had a wick. And he took a big old bite of it right there in front of me. Because his mind saw an apple and smelled an apple. He couldn't interpret that was a candle and that they were all candles. It's part of brain failure. They may do something like seeing a rug on the floor or shiny black tile as a hole or even as water. And so they're walking and they'll stop and they'll take a big step over a different colored tile or a rug because they think that it's water. Let's look at this next one, apraxia. This is unable to carry out routine motor tasks like tying shoes, fine motor skills, brushing teeth, getting in and out of the chair or getting in and out of the car because their brain is unable to coordinate their movement. People not being able to get in and out of the car is one of those stages that families lots of times will come to me and go, we did it this morning, we couldn't do it this afternoon. They can't get in and out of the car. I couldn't get them in the front seat, I had to get them in the back seat. They didn't know what to do. That's what this is. It's that coordination of all those muscles working together. Brain's failing. This is where we're going to start having falls. We said with the theory of retrogenesis, they haven't always been walking. As they stop walking, they're going to have falls. Again, we can't put them in the bubble wrap. We've got to be careful. They may reach for the cup to grab it and they completely miss it because Praxia. I see it. My distance, perception, depth, everything changes. That's going to lead us into the senses and what changes with their senses. What controls all the senses? The brain. What's happening with dementia? The brain is failing. The brain is dying. So the senses are all going to be changing. With vision, we teach a lot with Teepa Snow. If you're not familiar with her, she's got lots of great YouTube videos. Teepa, T-E-E-P-A, Snow, Teepa Snow. And here's how she describes vision with somebody with dementia. She says in the earlier stages of the disease, it is like they have on blinders. So they're losing this over here to the side. We're not going to come around. Like we said earlier, we're not going to come from the side, peripheral vision. Middle stage is like binoculars. They've got on binoculars, so they're not seeing all around here. And late stage is like a monocle. And late stage, they don't hardly move their neck. They'll almost always move their whole body. So their world starts to narrow to right here, late in the disease. The eyes are playing tricks on them. So we've got to be careful again about even the plate. If we have a white plate with mashed potatoes on it and a piece of chicken and a piece of bread, there's nothing on that plate because everything is white. Things like that. With sound, they're not able to filter out background noise. They may have a very high startle reflex. Again, this is where we want to use music, but keep in mind that music can also bring up emotional memories, and it's okay if they cry. We might talk about, what's that making you think about? This is kind of a sad song, isn't it? And then we're going to go to a different song after that one's over. Go ahead and let them have that. Smell. Smell diminishes, and this may be where you'll find someone eating something that's well out of date, or drinking milk that's not good anymore. Because even though I smelled it, they're not registering, they can't rational, reasonable behavior say this isn't good anymore. Those two don't go together. Taste. We know that for most people, taste starts to diminish except for sweet, and sweet does tend to stay for most people. The sweeter, the better. And then tactile stimulation, we want to keep doing that, but we've talked about them losing their fine motor skills and eventually losing their gross motor skills. This is help with daily care, and I mentioned Teepa Snow, and I want to make sure and get to this video because I've got a video next with Teepa Snow showing what she calls the hand under hand. And then again, I'm going to encourage you to look for some of her other videos, but I do want us to make sure and get to this. She's going to show how we can start to use this positive approach to care in somebody who's in the middle stages of the disease. And this goes, you can use this early in the disease, middle, and then most definitely later in the disease. This one happens to be with bathing, but it's going to be pretty general.
I'm going to get on the, are you right-handed? I need to be on the dominant side of the individual because that's where they have motor memory for doing all kinds of tasks. They don't know how to use their other hand nearly as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on this side. Now, hold hands like you normally hold hands. Shake hands like you normally shake hands. Go ahead and shake somebody's hand. And realize there's nothing real comfortable about that. I mean, once you shake hands, then it's like, okay, let go. And what we can end up with is a tug of war. Or late in the disease, people with dementia often like a lot of contact, and they'll squeeze you and actually hurt you. And it's like, ow, 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 ow. And where are you going to grab to get them loose? On the wrist. And what you're going to do is bruise them again. Shake hands, but then immediately slide up around so that what you're doing is holding on palm to palm, thumb to thumb, and you've got a lot of palm contact. Try that with your partner. And then turn it so their hand is on top of yours and just relax the hand so that it's very clear it's relaxed. What you're doing is you're putting pressure in the palm, and pressure in a human being's palm calms them down. So what you're actually doing is helping to calm them even while we're doing things, because I'm giving them input into the sensory system. Okay. The other thing that I can do is take the other hand and lay it on top of the hand. And what I'm creating is artificial warmth and padding. What are they missing? Warmth and padding. So all of a sudden we're feeling more comfortable. Now there's a big difference between me being down here where she can see me, because remember the visual field problems? What happens if I'm up here?
Like that. I just see the.
Yeah, and what if I face her like this? What she's going to start to do is mess with me here, or she doesn't realize what I'm doing, and it feels to her like I'm bossing her around. So I want to either sit down or get down so I'm at her level and she can really look at me. The other thing I can do, by applying just a little bit of pressure, she'll automatically look, and now I can talk to her. I'm going to help you get washed up. Okay, good. Listen, let's take your shirt off. There you go. Now, that's a little less distressing because she understood what I was doing by being to the side and having a single person in the room. And I'm not being loud, I'm not being noisy. What else?
I'm going to stop that there. I wanted you to see and get an idea of what I meant by gestures. She did a great job showing that hand under hand, the palm to palm. We're going to talk more about that next month with the later stage, keeping them safe, and how that actually calms someone. But you saw her with the washed up and take off our shirt, and she's in that field of vision. So using cues, we have here those verbal cues, the visual cues, and the touch cues to keep and gain their attention, to get them started. And again, in the middle stages, supportive stage, they can do a lot of this for themselves. We've got to get them started. That hand under hand, the physical assistance, we don't want to go in and do everything for them. In the middle stages, they're going to stop using the knife. They may have stopped using that earlier in the disease. They may get all the way to the spoon where we get rid of the fork and we're using the spoon and starting into some finger foods, but they can still feed themselves. Let them do it. The visual cues throughout the home, we can give visual cues or use pictures. Put a big old in our day program, we got a picture of a toilet on the outside of the bathroom door, because I know what that sign is. I've known that since I was little. So I can still find the bathroom. Keep in mind, they can have one thought at a time. And here's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we see. It takes patience, repetition, flexibility, and creativity to have effective, compassionate communication with persons with dementia. And here's the big one underlined: the person with dementia isn't giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. We've got to meet them right where they are. There's our information. Next month, we are going to be talking about the end stage of the disease. So we've done the early, now we've done the middle, we'll be doing the end stage of the disease. I wanted to make sure and leave some time for any questions or comments. I see Jamie's hopped back on. Jamie, was there anything, were you able to get everything answered? And can you follow up about the CEs?
Yes, the CE credits. You will receive a follow-up email from Marty, and in that email will be a link to our Survey Monkey evaluation, that you must complete if you want your CE credits. We ask everybody to complete the evaluation just for feedback, but the CE credits, it is required. And then you have till May 18th to complete that evaluation. Marty, did you want to say something about the Google survey?
Yeah, real quick. We also have a Google survey that we've put out there to help us collect information to report back on the goals and objectives we set forth when we applied for our funding. That should give you the opportunity to access that as you close out of Zoom today. But if not, that link will also be in the follow-up email. And we'd sure appreciate y'all filling that out as well.
And Holly, there was one kind of general question. I answered several, but asking about meanness. And I gave some examples, but I wanted to throw that out to you. If your care receiver is just mean.
I'm going to have this slide up and then I'll get right to that. I just wanted to point out the next month that we are doing late stage on June 13th from 2 to 3:30. I'll stop sharing and then I'll look at the, oops.
Do you all have a support group by any chance just for families of people that are cantankerous? Like
we just happen to have 3 support groups. And keep in mind that with each of the dementias, you can have folks that are a little more challenging than others. We may see a little bit more of it with Lewy bodies and frontotemporal than the others, but a person with Alzheimer's in the early stages can certainly have challenging expressions. Sometimes if the person was I'll use the word ornery or cantankerous throughout their whole life, dementia can exacerbate that. And we're like, oh, no. Now, it can go the other way, too, where it takes somebody and turns them into a teddy bear. I've sure seen that happen. But somebody who is having maybe a rage outburst, or they are just being really, really mean all the time, you may have to look the medication route for a little while. Keep in mind also with any time we do any kind of medication therapies, is what I like to call it, it's temporary, because as the disease changes, those meds are going to change, just like they're probably going to be on an antidepressant early in the disease, and then through the mid stages, they may not need that at all, then they may go back on it later in the disease. So if somebody's being really, really mean and saying hurtful things or doing things that are hurtful, a whole lot of it we have to almost bubble wrap ourselves. I feel you, those of you who are having this issue with your loved one. Believe me, I don't just do this professionally, I also do it personally. And sometimes we just have to do a lot of putting a boundary, being able to take care of ourselves, stepping away, taking that deep breath. But sometimes we do have to go the medication route to help they're not comfortable either if they're being mean and nasty and ugly and high anxiety and their blood pressure's out of sight all the time. We may need to just bring it down a notch.
And then there was a question there. Big Mom is going through the middle stages. Do I continue the battle insisting she wears her hearing aids? Already lost one set.
You do not, because hearing aids, glasses, and dentures and cell phones are the 4 things that go missing the most. I used to have a whole drawer full whenever I worked in another community. Those were the things that went missing. You're not going to keep somebody's hearing aids in, because what if they're at a stage in the disease with that retrogenesis where I don't wear hearing aids, you wear hearing aids, you stupid. That could very well be what it is. Or they're taking it out and they're dipping it in their tea to clean it. Seen that happen too. And there goes $5,000. I've had people put little GPS tracker devices on hearing aids. They do make them. They're out there. I had somebody who had their hearing aids and had the little thing like some people have with glasses. So they were connected. People get really, really creative, but at the end of the day, same thing with glasses. Lots of times people will stop wearing their glasses and they do okay. They're doing all right because their vision has changed. So as far as a battle or a fight, the other thing you can do is put it on the doctor, make it the doctor's fault. The doctor said we had to do this, see if that'll help. The doctors don't mind being the bad guys. But there does come a time that usually we give that fight up.
The video that you showed, the person that has those, are those accessible to everybody, or are you said something about pay? I don't know, something made me think you had to pay for the videos.
No, she just was, that one was advert. They have trainings that they do that are paid trainings, but you can go to YouTube and put in Teepa Snow, Positive Approach to Care, all of those. She has an entire website where you can learn that hand under hand message watching YouTube. Yeah. And she goes through bathing, toileting, brushing teeth, getting dressed, and will teach you right there on YouTube. So
I will try to put that link in the follow-up email to their website or YouTube channel.
Is it Positive Approach to Care, Jamie? Isn't that their site?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Positive Approach to Care is their site.
Or it might just be Teepa Snow.
Is
actually.
Either one of those that you put in, you're going to get to Tifa Snow. You'll see her, and her trainings are great, but a lot of her stuff is free.
A few people asked about the recording for last month. I had my server actually went out in the last 3 weeks, and so we have a salvage company working on that. I lost 3 months worth of stuff, but one of the most important things was the recording of last month's training. I should have back from the salvage people later this week to know what we have saved and what we weren't able to save. And as soon as we get that, if we have it, we will get that up. And it sounds like it looks pretty good, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
I will include the slides for last month
Okay.
with this month's follow-up email.
Somebody was asking about time between the stages. So a person with dementia, they'll go on these plateaus, then they'll progress, plateau, progress. But there are things that can push them into a progression. A urinary tract infection, COVID, pneumonia, the flu, bad news that somebody keeps telling them over and over and over, like your loved one's dead or we sold everything that you own. That'll push a person into a progression. And then there's just normal natural progressions where the disease is progressing. We don't know how long they're going to last with each person. Typically, if you look statistically, the younger a person is when they get dementia, the faster the disease moves. But that being said, I can name a slew of people who were diagnosed at 60 and lived into their 70s, or somebody who was diagnosed at 48 and died at 61. So it wasn't the 5 years that was expected. So we just don't know. Comorbidities go into it also. That's a huge part of it. What age they are when they develop the disease, family history. We've got to take that into consideration with a lot of folks. You know, most of the dementias, it's about 30%, but you get into something like a Huntington's or a FTD where it's closer to 50%. So there's lots of things to consider. We don't know on those times. That's what makes this so frustrating. One of the many things that makes it so frustrating. That's why this is how we treat it. We say we're treating dementia right now by doing programs like this. We're treating it as education. Jamie, do you see anything else?
I just wanted to comment on one thing because it came up in a chat and it came up earlier today, and I'll ask you to comment on this as well. But the information obviously is extremely helpful, but it can also be very sad and add stress to caregivers. And I think it's important to acknowledge that and knowing that you're preparing for a future or as best we can. And I hope that that's empowering. So when you do, as this disease does progress and you get to those times, you will know how to manage it or how to cope better or make better decisions, even though it may be sad right now and maybe add some stress. Know what you are doing this education is extremely important and will help you right now, but help you in the long run. And Holly, please add to that.
Well, it made me think what Marty was asking about a support group. So we've got 3 support groups. 2 of them are online. 1 is in person here in Fort Worth. We've got a weekly online support group that meets on Wednesdays. We can send those links. We've got an in-person that meets weekly here in Fort Worth. And then we have one monthly that is specific to grief. And grief is loss. Grief doesn't mean death. Grief means loss. And throughout the course of this disease, we're dealing with loss. We're in grief about our relationship the way it used to be. So whenever we ask families, like I just recently sent out a survey and asked families because I'm writing a program on how to do a support group. And I said, tell me what the support group means to you. And let me tell you what one man said last Wednesday that just about put me in tears. First of all, he started laughing at me when I asked that question. He just laughed like it was the funniest thing he ever heard. So why is he laughing at that question? And he said, Holly, you're seriously wanting me to put into a couple of sentences what the support group means. Here, let me give you this vision. I'm out in the ocean all alone. I cannot see land and there are no ships around. And here comes this little life raft and it's the support group. And it saves my life. That's
I
what
thought-
happened.
I want to add just a little bit to that if I could. I used to manage a retirement and assisted living facility in Dallas, and I did support the family support groups. And we had one year when a family was very much in denial, and you got to really take an open look at this, because sometimes your love is so great and the loss is so hard to accept. To really be looking at the fact of, am I in denial? And sometimes these things are, it's easy to say, well, that's them, but that's not me. That's not me, because it hurts so bad to see that as being me. I had a family one year that were taking their loved one away for Christmas. And two of the other families were trying to share with them some nightmares that they had experienced with taking their family out of town at that stages. And the family did it anyway. They were very much in denial. It was an absolute nightmare for them, and they had to turn around and come home immediately. And they were so grateful later. But it's just important that you really kind of look at this with an open eye and try to see through some of your grief, and hopefully that can help you some as you're listening.
Yep. And I'm going to add one more thing, and then we're going to go, just because of time. Somebody had asked about working through guilt. We try very hard not to call that guilt. Guilt sounds like you've done something bad and you've been accused of something and you're guilty. So we try to call it remorse. Remorse has grace attached with it. And we've got to give ourselves some grace. We didn't know what we didn't know. Maybe we did make a promise a long, long time ago, but when we made that promise, we had no idea where this disease was going. And that loved one that you made the promise to didn't have any idea either. And if they could just snap out of it and right now today see what it's doing to you and doing to your family and doing to your health and doing to your emotions, they wouldn't hold you to that promise. And then what we promised them was that we wouldn't put them in a nursing home. That's those old, what we think of, stinky, smelly, bright light nursing homes. We're not going to put them there. We're going to put them in a place that specializes in memory care, and we're going to educate ourselves and take care of ourselves so that we can better take care of them. We're going to send the information about the support groups. I encourage you to join us. We have people from all over the United States join us. You're welcome to, and we'll get those links to you. I sure appreciate y'all being here. Hope you're back next month for late stages, and we will see y'all next time.
Jamie, Holly, thank you so much. Thank you so much to everybody, and look forward to the follow-up email. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.